All right. Well, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October WEAll Talk. I'm really, really pleased to see your faces, to see you all gathering here today to join us for this special and really exciting topic that I don't think we have ever done a WEAll Talk on this one. So thank you so much, Jax, for your time, for offering the knowledge that you have that you're going to share with everyone in here today. So for those of you who are joining the WEAll Talk for the first time, this is a safe space where we gather, where we talk about a specific topic, where we have then a discussion where you can open your mind, you can ask questions to the speaker, obviously, but you can comment, you can suggest, you can share. This is where we gather and as a big family, and we discuss and we talk about things that are meaningful for everyone in different areas and for the well-being economy. So today, Jags Walia, he was born and raised in the uglier parts of London, working as a professional investor since 1995, started caring about responsible investing since 2008, and now he's been living in the Netherlands for the last 20 years. We're going to be talking about from nudge to the push. That's how he called it: money, power, and CO2. So using the full weight of the financial sector to decarbonize the dirtiest parts of the economy, more than what investors should do, this is how to do it. And he's going to be sharing a handbook for climate engagement. So if you have any comments or suggestions or questions while Jax is doing his presentation, please use the chat and I'll make sure that I'll be putting and I'll be sharing that with him once he finished. But always remember that we're going to keep the space for all of you to talk and share. So we'd love to hear your voices when he finishes. So this is it. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Jax, it's all yours. Welcome to our space.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you very much, Anna. And thanks for welcoming me to the WEAll family. Two things I want to say from the start. The lighting is not so good in this room, and it's not because I'm in a witness protection program. It's just because it's really dark. The sun hasn't come out yet. So, that's what happens in Holland. The second thing I wanted to say was, in terms of, the introduction to who I am, you did a really good job, and that's exactly who I am. So I'm a portfolio manager, which basically means I work in the financial sector and I'm an investor. And then above that, a lot of what I do in my work, as I'm going to explain in the coming 15 minutes, is just driven by my other job description, which is just being a dad, which really kind of changed everything for me in terms of the way I'm working. But so now, let me get to, what I want to talk about, which is money, power, and CO2. By the way, I know I thought of that title, but I really found that a cool title to have. I just thought it sounded so Gordon Gekko from like the 1980s in that movie Wall Street, for anyone who remembers that and stuff. I feel like I should be like 6 foot tall and like money, power, CO2 and have a cigar in my hand. But I'm not that cool. So what I'm really talking about is the financial sector that I work in. Back in 2008, we showed the world how powerful we were in a very bad way, because the financial sector, we had the global financial crisis. It was really bad for a lot of people who lost their jobs. We saw that. But me being inside the financial sector, what I also noticed was how incredibly powerful our sector was. Most of the time in a very greedy way, putting ourselves first. But I'm also thinking our sector could have done something else. If we can be that powerful, bringing the world downwards, maybe we can do something to kind of, contribute, bring the world upwards. So that's when I really started to think about, what the financial sector could do in terms of climate change. So there's a lot of things the financial sector can do. And normally we're kind of busy prioritizing ourselves. And as our sector tries to think of more stakeholders, there's a lot of problems in the world, we can't solve all of them at the same time. But so what I decided was, to prioritize for myself, CO2 emissions, climate change would be the problem that I want our sector to start to address. So that's, who I am and what we're doing. So what we do for our clients is two things, which is make money for them. That's like the biggest thing that, the clients really want to see when we're investing. find a stock that goes up. That's kind of, the job description. So that's the first thing, and we continue doing that. And the second thing is, how can we do that responsibly? So how can we do that with CO2 emissions in mind? Can I, invest in companies where I'm basically seeing a stock price going up, but I can also bring CO2 emissions going down for the planet? If we can do those two things, then me personally, I'm happy, because I've done something good for my clients and something good for my kids at the same time, so that's pretty much what I want to do. And in terms of the choices we have, when we invest in companies, there's two schools of thought when you're trying to invest responsibly. The first one is, if I see a dirty company, I'm not going to touch it, which is, a good thing to do. Like, you have companies which you think, this company is, doing something really bad in terms of human rights, or really bad in terms of CO2 emissions. I don't want to have any part of that. I'm not going to put my dollars towards funding this company. So I avoid them and I walk away, invest in much cleaner companies and, go forwards with those companies. That's one choice that you have. I didn't make that choice. I don't do that. So the other choice that you have, which is the one I do all day long, is I look for the companies which are dirty and, which are tainted. And then what I do is I say, okay, I will invest in these guys. So I will give them my money, but not passively and in an accepting way of, hey, have my money. I know you're doing the wrong thing, but as long as the stock price goes up, I don't care. So we don't do it that way. So what I do is I get these companies who might have like massive CO2 emissions, or they might be trying to do something in terms of, increasing their CO2 emissions. And I'll basically invest with these guys and then influence them. We call it engage. That's like an industry term that's been popped up. But I'll try to basically influence them, discuss with them, not to do something I don't want them to do, to try to like change the direction that they're moving in. And in about 1 minute, I'll give you like a real example of like, how we've kind of done that in practice. And so basically, in terms of the why, I kind of just thought, I can either avoid the problem that we have, or I can address the problem that we have. And avoiding is easier. You get to go home early if you avoid the problem. You just look for the companies which are saints, invest in those, and then you have, really good sleep and, not much to worry about. But what I wanted to do, because I think it's more effective, is to actually address the problem. So I find the companies who are, not the saints today, and then I try to change their, behavior, rehabilitate them, and to say, okay, let me address the problem. That's more effective in my view, and move the direction you're going in. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of sleepless nights, and it's much more stressful. And it doesn't always work. Failure happens, and you have to recognize when you fail, what am I going to do now? So you've got to, keep that in mind as well. So before I go into how we do that, and, I'm going to talk about that in detail with a real example, are there any questions so far on what I'm doing and why? And just turn the mic on if there is, and so I can hear you. Okay, the silence must mean it's clear. Excellent. Okay, or there's a question in the chat that I've missed, but let me know if that happens, Anna. Perfect. Okay, so now in terms of how, I basically wanted to speak to companies to get them to change their behavior. The way we do that has changed in the last 13 years, because when I started doing this, in hindsight, I can say I was doing it badly, and I've improved how I'm doing it kind of going forwards. And with the wisdom of the last 13 years, from having a really complicated way of talking to companies and thinking about how we can change their behavior, it just came down to 3 things. And this, I wrote about it in this climate engagement handbook that we produced. And Anna will put it into the chat so everyone else can like read it in their own time. And so I made this book, so not so that I would know what to do, but so that the whole of the financial sector could take this blueprint and use it in, maybe other firms can also start doing what we do. Just take it from us, they can improve it, go forwards with it. Everyone can just use this in their own way. But the 3 ways we basically engage with companies is, number 1 is basically understand the complexity of the situation that company is in. So that's the first one. So don't start talking to them and asking them to do anything until first you're trying to, imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. Understand the complexity of the situation the company is in. And that includes how many degrees of freedom do they really have? Who are they really trying to please? What are they trying to optimize for? That's number 1. Just understand the complexity of the situation they're in. Number 2, then we need to start thinking, what is the right question I should ask them? That, what do I want them to do that they can do and that I want them to do that's good for the planet? So what's the right question to ask them? And the pitfall here is you mustn't ask them to do something they can't do. Like, never ask someone to do that, and that sometimes you see that happening, but don't do that. And then the third one is basically evaluate what they say they are doing or what they say they will do versus what they're actually doing. So if we do those 3 things, if we understand the complexities and then ask the right question, then we can start evaluating what they say they'll do versus what they're actually doing. That's pretty much the theory of, how we engage with companies on this one topic of decarbonization. And I'll give a real example now with a real company, but we also engage with companies on other areas as well. But so a real example would be in March 2019, I was in the office and we had a meeting with the CFO of a power generation company. So this basically, when you turn the lights on, all the electricity, it gets generated by someone. That's a power generation company. So we had a meeting in our office in Amsterdam with the CFO of a Hong Kong-based power generation company. And when they were talking to us about how much money they were going to make, which we're really happy to hear about, and how their earnings are going to increase, and we're really happy about that as well, they said they were thinking about, this growth path, like increasing how much money they're going to make by building 2 new power plants. But these were going to be 2 coal power plants to be built in Vietnam. And, as anyone who's kind of busy with climate change knows, coal is not good. And building new coal power plants is even worse than not good. So when the guy said to us, almost like it was a normal thing to do, like there was no alarm bells ringing. He was just like, if you turn to slide 15, you're going to see the growth projects, which are these 2 coal power plants. And then, for us, it was like a big alarm bell ringing. So we said, please, well, we didn't say it in those words, but what I was thinking was, please don't build 2 new coal power plants. But obviously, you're in a meeting, you're in a suit and tie. We don't express ourselves as we really feel it. So, we basically started to say to this company, why would you want to build 2 new coal power plants given the change, climate change and the actions that we have there? This is actually going to increase your portfolio CO2. It's going to increase the planet's CO2 as well. And even more than that, and this was really understanding the complexities of their business, they want to make money. So we had to basically explain, we don't think they can actually make as much money as they believe by building these 2 new coal power plants. And so getting into the details, it was basically writing them a nice letter to say, a coal power plant normally lasts about 48 years if you maintain it properly. But we don't think you're going to get 48 years of life out of these new coal power plants, because we don't think the planet's going to be using coal for that long, or at least it shouldn't be using coal for that long. So once we start to, get inside their heads of this actually is not going to be a great investment to make, plus for us, it's not going to have the right impact on climate change that we're looking for. So, for those reasons, don't go forwards with these 2 coal power plant projects. And that conversation, it was hard work because it lasted 8 months. That included 2 face-to-face meetings. and a lot of emails backwards and forwards and monitoring how they were discussing these two projects internally and which way they were considering going. So we had to, try to lean on them, but lean on them nicely, which is like a very delicate thing to do. So, that's the nudge, where it's basically trying to explain it's in your best interest not to do this, not because, we're going to make things bad for you, but because in terms of profitability, the outlook is not going to be that great for these two projects, but then obviously, if this company, continues on that path of building these two coal power plants, we need to change the way we speak to them, nudge a little bit harder. But we were really lucky because in December of 2019, they sent us an email to basically say, we're not going to go through with these two coal power plants. That was really good for us. That's what we wanted. And then they did something which we didn't ask for, which was even better. They basically said, we're never going to build another coal power plant again for this company anywhere on the planet. And that wasn't what we asked for. We were thinking small, and the company was thinking big. And so we were really happy with the way, that conversation ended after 8 months of like to and fro. So, that's just one real example of how we're trying to use money and our sector as a force for good, because I know we can be a force for greed. We've proven that and stuff, but I now want to see what we can do the other way. That was all I had to say from my side.
And okay, now and is when
excellent.
Go ahead, Jack. Go.
Oh yeah, I was just saying I saw a question pop up, but I can't flick to it from here. So if you can let me know what's being asked.
Yes. So Sacha, please just go ahead and
yeah, thanks, Jags. That was really interesting to listen to, and it sounds as though you're getting really good results, which is fantastic. I was just curious, you were talking at the beginning about dirty companies and clean companies. What KPIs do you actually look at to help you distinguish between those?
Yep, excellent. So with identifying the dirty companies and clean companies, that's really, quite easy, because you can look at, with power generation companies, how are they generating that power? So if I've got a company that's saying I'm 80% coal, 10% gas, and 10% renewables, that's going to be quite a dirty mix. And if you've got the other side, that's fine. So identifying them is the easy part. But then, you want to now try to set KPIs to make them cleaner. And so, Sacha, in terms of those KPIs, we simplified it to 3 things, which was their willingness, ability, and commitment. And here's the problem. When you look at a company's willingness, we take willingness as basically what are they saying, and their ability as what are they doing, and their commitment as what are they getting paid to do. So in terms of willingness, I can go into like a company's website, and most power generation companies, like, when you get to their landing page on their website, they're going to talk about sustainability. There's going to be a lot of green coloring and that kind of stuff going on. And when you drill down, we want to know, what are they, what are their ambitions? What are they targeting? What are they committed to? So in terms of their willingness, what are they saying in terms of their goals? So I might have one company that is saying, Xcel Energy, which is a US power generation company. And it's basically saying, we're going to reduce our CO2 emissions from 47 million tons per annum we're going to reduce that by 85% by 2030, which is a really big reduction. So that's a reduction of about 40 million tons, which is the equivalent of every single car in Holland. We have 7.5 million cars. Every single car in Holland being taken off the road forever. So if we basically say, what's your willingness? They will tell us what their goals, what their ambitions are. But then I need to know what their ability is, which is, how are you going to do this? And what I've seen is there's 2 ways companies say they're going to do this. Number 1 is they have something realistic and easy that they can do. And number 2 is they have some magic that they're hoping is going to appear. So if the company says, like Xcel Energy, we're going to do this by we have 4 coal power plants, and we're going to close one down, and then another, then another, then another. That's quite easy. I can see if that's being done, yes or no. That doesn't rely on magic or anything else, new technology breakthroughs and stuff. So if I get that, then I know their ability is pretty high. Sometimes I see companies and they're going to achieve their climate goals by depending on new technologies which don't exist yet, which one day will appear. That, you know, I just called it the magic technique. That is not such a great score in terms of ability to make this change. If you're relying on something which doesn't exist yet, or is not economic, or is not scalable, I don't think that's a pretty solid KPI. Then I'm like, geez, that sounds like magic, and I don't like that. Not in investing and stuff. And then thirdly, in terms of commitment, I do ask when I'm in company meetings, and the first time I did this was in 2016. We had a company that was telling us, you know, how green their ambitions were, how they were going to get it done. And when I looked around the room, there was a lot of senior managers there, and I just said, the exact words, I said, is anyone in this room getting paid to do this? And the answer was no. So that's what I take as my commitment. So there's willingness, ability, and commitment. One of the KPIs, I want people to get paid to decarbonize, because I don't want them to just tell it to me and then show it to me in a nice PowerPoint slide. I want to know when I'm not looking, they will still have to do this. So I think those are like the main KPIs. And in the document that Anna uploaded, it goes into detail on this. So if you need more.
Thank you so much. Thank
Cool.
you, Jags. So Katherine, it's going to be you, then Rutger, and then I think Arnold, you posted question on the chat, but I don't know exactly what it's referring to. I'm sorry if I missed it, but it says, where was the money invested in instead? Are you?
Instead of the Vietnam coal.
Yep.
Okay, the Vietnam. Okay.
Excellent. Cool. Great question, Arnold. Because, you know, when I had to do step one, which was understand the complexities of their business, what I did was I looked across their portfolio, and they also had wind investments they were making in mainland China. So one of the things we said to them, and we've done this before with other companies as well, but in that specific company, one of the things we said to them was, don't put 2.5 billion on these Vietnamese coal power projects. Do try to invest more if you can, scaling up your Chinese wind projects. But if that doesn't need all of that 2.5 billion, feel free to give the rest back to me as a dividend. You know, so those were some of the options we kind of laid out to them. And they didn't give us the extra cash back as a dividend. They kind of like went back for other internal investments. So.
Okay, thank you.
Katherine, go ahead.
Thanks, Anna, and Jags, welcome to WEAll. Thank you for spending time with us and joining the community. I think we're going to learn a lot from you. I have 2 questions, if I may. One is quite a fear, and I'm sorry if this is a bit personal, but how, in your industry, how exceptional are you? Because I've known you for a while now, and I see you really pushing the envelope. What concerns me is, are you the exception that proves the rule, or do you feel there really is a community of practice building and who takes this sort of approach and is willing to make the choices and push the envelope that you're doing? And perhaps to that, I know there's another non-climate related instance where I find incredibly inspiring, where you have used the power of money, as you say, to change company attitudes to then change government law on LGBT rights. And I think colleagues would love to hear that as well, if you can do that in a nutshell.
Cool. Okay, so first question's easy. I want to say I'm really unique and I'm really special, but it's not true. Yeah. So, but I do think it's a small portion of the financial sector. Like, I definitely think we're in the minority. I think it's a small portion of the financial sector that actually engage this actively with companies. And I know that because when I engage with companies, I start quietly and one-on-one, and then I try to end loudly and in a large group. So I'll ask, like, you know, in the Hong Kong, you know, with the company that was doing the Vietnamese coal power plants, that whole engagement was one-on-one. Sometimes when it's not working, you know, and you think I'm wasting time, then I start to open up my engagement to basically say to the company, if you're not listening to me on my own, I'll find 10 other large shareholders and we'll ask you the same question in unison as a group. And what I found, previously is when you try to find 10 large shareholders, some of them are quite hesitant to join you in your demands on a company because they don't want to jeopardize the relationship they have with the company, or they have other reasons. So I do still feel like there's only a small portion of our sector which is this actively, but I want all of our sector to be this active. That's why I wrote the handbook. Originally I wrote it for our team, and then I was like, forget that, I should write it for our firm. And then I was like, what's the point in our firm doing it well, but every other firm doing it differently? So then I went above and beyond and just said, this is for everyone. And, going open source with the way to kind of engage. And then on the second question of how we use money and power to also, engage with companies and then governments on the LGBT issue. So that's a real example which I had from 2011 up until 2013. So it took 2 years of my life. And basically, we were a large investor in a French oil company. And that oil company was actually a very, large foreign direct investor in Uganda. And in 2011, Uganda wanted to bring in a rule that basically said, if you're gay or lesbian, you would get the death penalty. And if you know of someone who's gay and lesbian and you don't report them to the authorities, you'll get 7 years in prison. So when we, became aware of that via our friends at Amnesty International, we knew we had money invested in a company which was the largest foreign investor in Uganda. So if I have influence over that company and that company has influence over the government in Uganda, I should, indirectly get a voice as well then. So we basically spoke to this company. I'm going to cut a long story short, but we spoke to this company for 2 years with obstacles to basically say, what can you do to stop this happening? How much influence do you have with the Minister of Energy, with the president, in that country? And we had a lot of setbacks in those 2 years, but eventually we changed what we were asking for. So first we were thinking, could they stop investing in this country, or can they, see what influence they can have? And it got really frustrating. So in the end, 2 years later, the idea, that I came up with was to say to them, on your website, it says, you're an equal opportunities employer and you respect human rights everywhere you operate. So if that's not true in certain countries because the money's too good, why don't you just change what's on your website? And that went down very badly. And so in the end, what they basically said was in 2013, after a lot of, discussions that they had had, that basically that law would be taken out and put into review. So it wouldn't be applied, but it would just be up for review. But that review process would take from now until the end of time. And that was as much influence as that company could do to basically help us with what we believed in, and so, what we wanted. And that wasn't a climate issue, that was a human rights issue. Sometimes, we get involved in other things that we also find important.
Thank you, Jags. Rutger, it's going to be your turn.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jags. I really love it that I guess a lot of people with this ESG investing, they're kind of thinking that they're investing in sustainability, but it's actually just a way to invest in big tech and just Facebook and Google and all those kind of things. So I love the fact that you've gone the other direction.
I know, and it's not
because Facebook and stuff don't have any emissions, and they just on their data centers they just put a couple of windmills, and then you're top of the list of the KPIs. So it's really simple to be an ESG investor. So I love the fact that you're doing the opposites and actually going for the big ones. There was one thing you alluded to it, but follow this. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it, but everybody that follow this is a group that actually are investors in big oil, and they actually organize investor revolts. And in the beginning, it was very tough going, but what especially works apparently is that all these pension funds are investing all our money in this big oil. And at the same time, they're talking about sustainability and how important they find that. And by peer pressure, the groups of pension funds have been increasing. And so what Follow This actually does is they actually get climate resolutions passed in big oil. You alluded to it in the sense that I can find 10 other big investors, but I think one of the tools in the toolbox is also to organize really through a majority of the investors to actually shift the company's perspective. The other perspective I sometimes have in investing, because I also do a bit of that, is that actually, maybe these are just companies that are doomed. If you don't shift, basically your argument also for the coal was, you could fine, go ahead, invest in coal, but you're doomed in the future. We can engage with the automotive industry that is currently there, the legacy automakers, but they are actually imploding at this moment, and Tesla is increasing hugely. They just had quarterly profits yesterday, which are far exceeding all expectations, while the rest of the auto industry is imploding. So the other argument would be, why engage with companies that are going to die out anyway, and invest in the disruptors, so to speak. So that's a bit of a provocative, because I sometimes feel, have your greenwashing, have your coal plants, whatever, you're going to be annihilated in a couple of years, and enjoy it while it lasts, but it's you're doomed.
So I like those points that you're raising, Rutger, because I'm just thinking, there's a couple of them, but first, with Follow This, the guy who heads it up, Mark Bernal, I used to work at APG, the large Dutch pension fund, from 2006 till 2018. So we had a contact. But the way we engage, we did it quietly, one-on-one first. And when it doesn't work, then we went to the more public, let's get to the AGM, let's get 10 people together. But Follow This starts from, the other side of, they start with the big group ready on day one, and then they ask for what they want. So that's a different approach that we have. And in terms of, with some companies, if you think that the strategy that they're on is going to get them doomed, you can choose to avoid these guys and go with the winners. You could have chosen, between a car company and Tesla, and then just said, well, the future is going to be electric. You don't have that much electric, so you're not going to be in the future. That's a really nice one to do. But sometimes the company going on the wrong path, even though that path is going to lead towards its doom, while it's going on that path, it's going to kill us, because it's producing so much CO2 that he might take 20 years to die if he continues on the route he's on. And we don't have 20 years. So then I'm just shit, he is going to be doomed if we leave him alone, but I'm also going to be doomed if I don't do anything about it. So it's almost like if you're in a taxi and the guy's driving the wrong way, you're asking him nicely, but sometimes you got to grab the steering wheel as well. Which you don't want to do, because that gets dangerous and messy, but sometimes you have no choice. So sometimes you can't leave them to be doomed, because they can take us down with them.
Yeah, and some of them are real. I think even things like Volkswagen and stuff, they're already shifting so fast. Exactly. But I think the disruptive, even your argument against the coal plant was basically a disruption argument, right? You are going to be, it's probably not the expectation that you have. I didn't want to criticize, but it was just.
No, but it's really good, because I want to hear other views as well, because I've been doing it this way for so long. I've kind of brainwashed myself that this is the best way to do it. So that's why when we put out our climate engagement handbook, we said on there that took 13 years of trial and error to get to where it is now. So in 2 years' time, it won't be the same. Somebody should improve the process we're working on. This can't be the best way to do it. We've got to be evolving as we go and stuff. So. But thanks for that question, Rutger. I liked your thoughts there.
All right, so we have Henry's going to be the next one. Lukas, you're going to be the next one. Then Jelle, and I think Samuel left question on the chat. So then Samuel, you will have the mic on as well. Henry, go ahead.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, Jags. I found that really fascinating. Lot to think about. One of the bits you talked about was trying to understand the degrees of freedom of companies, which I think is a really must be a fascinating topic to because obviously presumably it's not clear cut. And I just wondered whether does that factor into your decision on whether to invest at the start? And are you going for companies with more or less degrees of freedom? And what do you think the greatest constraint you find generally on their degrees of freedom?
Okay, excellent. So, Henry, the first question, when we do our analysis before we put any money into a company, we analyze how many degrees of freedom does this company have? Because if it's a dirty company to start with, and at best it can move to here, that might not be enough to really move the needle. But if I have another company which is dirty to start with, but at best it could move to here, like, decarbonize by 80% by 2030, then that's beautiful for me. So we try to analyze that up front. And then I select my stocks, which might be dirty, but have the larger degrees of freedom. So that's like a pre-investment analysis. Does that answer the first part of your question?
Yes.
Excellent. And then in terms of where are the constraints in terms of what the degrees of freedom are, it's two things. There's one which is I don't know if it's a genuine constraint or if it's something that they like to use as a constraint. And so number one, it's what is their the country that they're domiciled in, or that they operate in actually. What is their country's climate ambition? Because a lot of the companies that I invest in, power companies, they don't want to decarbonize faster than their government. So, like with the Paris Climate Agreement, every country in the world had to have their own NDC, like a nationally determined contribution, which is basically how much a country is committed to decarbonizing. So if Paris would have needed, 55% by 2030, but we've got a country that says I can do 40% reduction by 2030. The companies that operate in that country don't want to do more than 40% by 2030. So a lot of them use the country that they operate in, that country's goal as, I can't move faster than that. Whereas I might think that country's goal isn't, fit for purpose. It needs to improve like most countries' climate ambitions. So actually, I don't want you as a company to hide behind or wait for the country's ambitions to increase. Don't wait for the government. Just look at your business model and what you can do and take it to the limit of your own, capacity to change. So that's number one. And number two, it tends to be the regulator, because for a lot of US companies that we invest in, like we don't like coal because of the CO2 footprint, but the regulator might say, but this coal power plant, I can't close it down. That forms part of the base load capacity. So your background electricity generation always comes from this coal power plant. If I got rid of that, we're going to have risk of blackouts. So the regulator is, the second constraint. So sometimes it happens when, the second part of our process, asking the right questions at the right place. You're not supposed to speak to the company in that situation. You should go and engage with the regulator to say, help me understand why this coal power plant has to stay open until 2040. What are the considerations? And what we find is we care about ESG, but so does the regulator, except they picked a different letter. So I might care about the environmental aspect. They care about the social side of this coal power plant is the largest employer in this town. I can't just, let those jobs kind of disappear overnight. So the regulator plus the country ambitions tend to be the biggest constraints on degrees of freedom.
That's fascinating because, you think, I thought you might suggest shareholders or other shareholders or banks or I don't know, or whatever, but actually it's government, effectively both these organs of government that have the biggest impact. But I suppose that is because energy is such a highly regulated.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So that might not be the case with obviously other sectors.
Yeah. So if you're in the example Rutger mentioned, looking at two car companies, that won't be such a problem. Like, the regulator's not going to say, don't produce so many electric vehicles. They'll be like they'll probably want you to produce even more. So, in that way, the regulator might actually be a tailwind, whereas for some sectors, it's a headwind, and that constrains their degrees of freedom.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
All right. Okay, Lukas, welcome in.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. It's been really interesting. I really love your way of explaining things. I think it's been really clear and really, really interesting. I guess the question I had, or that came up in my head, is kind of taking it the bigger picture in terms of the kind of influence that the sector has as a whole, and where I may be a little bit worried is on the front, like from a well-being economy, we would probably see in the future a lot more companies as well who are prioritizing kind of like social enterprise who are prioritizing community outcomes and environmental outcomes over returns. Like they still have to be profitable, of course, but they kind of got different priorities. They might not be on the stock market either. So I was wondering, especially if you say, I was just a bit worried that you say this to kind of growing stocks and increasing and growth still seems to be a major criteria for the sector you're investing in. So I wonder whether you see how the sector could maybe support businesses who have different kind of priorities.
Yeah, so that's a really hard question to answer because basically I'm thinking about it like, as you asked it. The companies will always need to be profitable, otherwise they won't be companies anymore. They'll make themselves doomed. So that is always going to be priority number one. But what I am witnessing, I'm going to kind of like draw two pie charts here, then I'll show it to you. So, okay. So I'll draw two pie charts, and like the area shaded in pink is the amount that they care about profitability. And then the area that I'll shade in orange, color in orange, is the amount that they care about other things, like other stakeholders, the environment, community, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know which one we're at right now, but I know which one we used to be. And I wish I'd been better at drawing. But so, in 1995, when I started investing, then this was the company's priority, where the bit that was kind of like shaded is profitability. The bit in pink, like the pink stripes, that was profitability. And that small little slice would have been other things. But other things might have been their own employees, their bonus pool, that kind of stuff. But profitability was number one. And recently, I think we're moving towards more of a mix, and I've just very quickly drawn this. But I'm not going to say, because I don't know where we are. So I can't say companies now care 50% about profitability and 50% about other stakeholder issues. But I know we're definitely moving away from this towards caring about more other topics, i.e., a company's impact on the community, the impact on the environment. But it's really hard to know, where they are along there and how much they want to move. That's really, it differs one company to another, and then also it's always hard to know what they say versus do they really mean that on the ground? I've seen examples of companies telling me great things in terms of stakeholder engagement, and then when I speak to people on the ground, they haven't seen anything of it. So, it's hard. It's a tough question to answer, Lucas.
I guess maybe to make it a bit more specific, like if from you or in your company, when you do investing and you would invest in a company and they come to you, look, we really want to prioritize the environment and our community, but that means our stocks might go down. Like, would you then be able to still invest in them, or would you then have to go, oh no, sorry? Like,
no, because I have two jobs to do simultaneously. Like, I've got to make money for our clients, and I've got to do something positive in terms of like CO2 emissions, like for the environment. And I can't do one or the other. It'll be simpler if I could just have one of those jobs. Like if I just wanted to make money, I wouldn't have to care about any of the other stuff that keeps you awake at night, And if you only wanted to like decarbonize, I could just take the filter of the cleanest companies or the ones that are reducing the most and then go home early. But doing both jobs simultaneously is what makes it tough. But we choose to do that because we need to do both of that. Like we can't just subsidize our way onto decarbonization to have a cleaner planet, which has, no jobs and, people dying of hunger instead of climate change. So.
All right. Lukas, I hope that is, I'm just conscious of the time, and I would love to give Jelle and Samuel time as well for their questions or comments. Jelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start off. Thank you very much. I'll start off with a comment. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very inspiring, and also all the questions are really thought-provoking. As my question is a follow-up, backtracking on Catherine's question of, are you unique in your sector or not? And you said, I want to be unique, but I am a minority. And we've spoken a lot about the challenges businesses face with implementing ESG and balancing that out with their profit thinking. But what challenges, or what are the largest barriers that financial institutes or financial players face when adopting your manual? So what are some of the, in Dutch we say weerstand, what are the challenges that they run into when they look at your documents like, no, that can't happen for me?
Yeah. So I think, number one, this has been the biggest debate, like when I speak to a lot of my peers, like in the US and stuff. There's this thought that if you become more responsible, you do more ESG, it's going to cost you money. Nobody wants to do that. Like, nobody wants to do something that's going to cost them money. So the biggest one, Jelle, is just, if we start all taking this, like, environmental considerations into approach and taking responsibility into consideration, then it's going to cost us money. And that is that's the biggest resistance point, but there's two schools of thought on ESG. One is actually going to cost you money. One is that it's going to actually make you money. And me personally, I don't think either one of those are right. I think it just depends on what you choose to do and how you do it. And I've just seen examples of, if I speak to a company and I encourage them to increase their spend on safety, of course that's going to cost you money. So that's good for ESG and it's going to cost you money, but I would still want to do it. And then other times I might have stuff which is ESG related, which is going to make you money. So we might have a wind farm operator and I'm going to invest more in them so they can put up even more wind farms. That's going to make us money and it's going to be good for ESG. So whether it costs you money or make you money depends on what you do. And sometimes, even with your eyes open, you might want to engage with a company knowing it's going to cost you money, because you might think safety is more important than, like having, 45% profit margins. Okay, we'll have 44, but I need that safety on there to know it's sustainable. Does that answer the question, Jelle?
Yeah, definitely. There's a bunch of other questions that came up, but I'll pass it on. Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you, Jelle. Samuel, your turn.
Okay. Hello, everybody. And also, again, special thanks to you, Jags, and also for all the questions. I totally agree with Jelle. And actually, my key question builds up a little bit also on what Jelle was just saying, but rather on asking about like the challenges from in different investor side. I'm really curious about, after all your experience that you had with investing into companies all around the world, what are still the challenges despite having received this investment from you? Is there like a common thread that you find, like, okay, those companies you've invested into now receive the money, but they still have a big challenge? Is there a common thread between those challenges, and how could this be solved or at least improved?
I'm thinking, Samuel, I think I don't understand the question.
The key question is,
help me? Yeah.
Yes, no problem. In regards to, you are doing the investments, right, into the different companies.
Yep.
And many times one of the key restraints towards also moving towards sustainability and making a change is the financial resource, right? But then even once you have invested, maybe sometimes the changes are still very slow or not happening or not living up to the promises.
Yeah.
Have you seen a common thread? Apart from the regulators and the government's goal?
Yep. I haven't seen a common thread. I would say, like, the closest we've seen to a common thread is when a company, says it's going to do something, the key risk in it not doing what it said it's going to do is that nobody there was actually paid to keep that promise. So that's why, like, when I was like explaining earlier, I think to Henry, just the willingness, the ability, and the commitment. That commitment part is basically, if a company says I'm going to do this and shows you how they're going to do it, the CEO, his bonus should depend on him actually achieving that goal. Because if he doesn't, that, I would say, is the most likely place where you're going to see, the companies don't show you or say that they failed. What they will do is they might adjust their ambition. And then the time horizons change, the scope has changed, something. So they will never come out and just say, oh, I failed to do that. They will say that decarbonization by 2030, it's going to be 2035 and it's going to apply to this. And that will be different to what they said originally. But normally it's because they weren't really paid or incentivized to actually do what they said they were going to do. But I think that's the closest thing to a common thread. For the rest, every company can have its own reasons for like doing it differently than they said.
Very much.
Cool.
All right. So Katherine was wondering if anyone else would have another question, because she has another one. So I don't know if, yes, Neen, and then Katherine. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, Jags. It's been a really interesting topic to kind of explore. And I guess what struck me was I was really surprised that there are still these large organizations that need to be told this stuff by an external party to come in and say, you can't invest in coal,
I know.
It's like, I kind of thought we'd moved further. We all kind of wished. So I guess I'm interested to know, like, what is the reality there now? Like, how far have we moved along that kind of spectrum where people now go?
Yeah. So that's a great question, Mean. And by the way, thanks for like doing this in the evening, because I think it's like, so this is your evening time. But like, to be honest, I get shocked, like, that, you think when you can like watching the news that most companies, know how much we need to decarbonize, and then they do say it, but they don't, most of them, like I think only 25% of the S&P 500 companies, so like in the US, the top 500 companies, 25% of them have climate goals. So 75% don't. And then out of the ones that have climate goals, just having a goal doesn't mean you're going to do it. That just like, show me the strategy that goes with it. Let me measure the strategy, see if it actually even corresponds to that goal. So it's really surprising in a negative way how much we have to do when we have to engage.
I mean, I understand that the whole measurement piece is really hard, and particularly when you're looking at business as usual. But I would have thought if you're looking at big investment, where you can invest in 2 more coal stations, it's like, surely you would be, thinking about that investment in the long term. Like, wouldn't you have that kind of strategic outlook? That just blows me away, that whole premise. So that's even scarier that you say that that's kind of common.
Yeah, I know. We've even had, like, in 2015, Shell Oil Company, we engaged with them. They wanted to drill for oil in the Arctic. I mean, they wanted to, this was a new idea that they had in 2015, and we engaged with them. Thank God that was a successful engagement as well. But really, they took us there for a field trip, and there was just, icebergs everywhere. And you were like, this is beautiful to look at. Why do you want to stick an oil rig in the middle of that? But they have these ideas, and that was not a long time ago. That was 2015, the same year as the Paris Climate Agreement got signed. So,
well, I really hope it gets easier for you from here on in, and that it speeds up. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Wayne.
Katherine, and then Rutger, go ahead.
So speaking of Shell, I don't know if folks saw that at the TED Countdown last week, the CEO of Shell was on a panel with an activist from XR who really took him to task and then walked off. And I've noticed really different reactions to that in sort of various conversations I've been part of. Some folks are, yeah, you go girl, amazing. And then other folks, admittedly more from this more traditional sort of orthodox business community, well, that's, that you didn't get to hear what he said. Where's the dialogue? Shutting down conversations is not helpful. And I mean, Jags, I know you're someone who sort of who is passionate about those sorts of conversations and reaching out to people that are not the usual suspects, that people you'd invite to go for a coffee with you. I just love your reaction to that incident and how it landed with you and how it felt almost watching it. Well.
Okay, I didn't watch it, so I never saw it. But if I hear about it, like I know Ben van Beurden, I've spoken to him, since he became CEO of Shell, and we had a long 2-year dialogue on drilling for oil in the Arctic, and I found him on that discussion very constructive, like willing to look at, the risks and the rewards. So, but also, I don't really have confrontational discussions, just because that's like my personality. So, we'll talk about what I want and if I think there's better opportunities. And, if somebody disagrees with it, then maybe I'll ask again with 10 other people who are much bigger. And then, ask again. But then at the end of the day, if I don't get what I want, I'm not tied to anything. I can just walk away. I can just say, okay, we talked about it for 2 years. It went completely the wrong way. It's still nice having an open dialogue, but I'm not going to put any money in. I'm taking my money out and stuff. So, you don't have to make it that confrontational. You can always vote with your wallet and go if you don't get what you want.
Just as a reflection, and that's the difference between an investment and a local community or someone who needs, a local employee or so on as well. But, that's why it's so good, Jags, that you're so conscious of using that power of investment and that leverage of being able to walk away.
Yeah,
almost
exactly.
On behalf of others who have less power.
Yep. Yeah. And we speak to the others as well. We make sure, when we were talking show in the Arctic, that we actually had conversations with the Inupiat community that live up in Barrow in the northern part of Alaska, who would have been the most impacted by any oil spill that might have happened there. So.
Well done. All right, Rutger, it's going to be you, the last one. We are not going to have more time apart from your question. And so go ahead.
Yeah, maybe also in reaction to Min, and maybe Jags can kind of say whether he recognized it. When I talked to Mark van Baal of Follow This about Shell, he actually said what also is kind of an anthropological assessment of Shell, in the sense that everybody's that is at the top at the moment. They made their whole career from the drilling station to regional head of oil and stuff. So in a sense, it's also a lack of imagination that they can't really envisage this thing. And Mark van Baal, he said, actually, if you talk to the youngsters at Shell, there are also people there that are dreaming of being CEO perhaps in 40 years, and they realize that they will not be they will not be part of it. So I'm just wondering, and I guess it's also a matter of power dynamics within a country or a company. So I'm just wondering whether there are other fault lines within a company, or is it very much a generational thing, or how do you recognize these kind of?
Yeah, I think it's overgeneralizing to say it's a generational thing, that the older generation don't care and the younger generation are all very green.
Yeah,
I think that's too simplistic. Because and I've never done an anthropological study on anything, but just from the range of CEOs that I speak to, they're basically, you get differences within them. Like some see the problem as more urgent and more responsible, that needs to be dealt with right now, whereas others, like I've had in the same period, I can't remember when it was, I think it was 2016. I've had some oil companies which I remember talking to me about how they're going to address climate change and what they're going to do. And I've had others which stopped me asking the question by, as soon as I start talking about decarbonizing, they start telling me literally, and I'll quote without telling which company it was, they just said, the science is fuzzy on climate change. And so we're not going to talk about this topic until we know more. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm 30 seconds into my meeting. I had a whole bunch of questions on this topic and they don't want to talk about it because they just said the science is fuzzy. And I didn't want to say, you made the science fuzzy. But I was just like, we can't talk about it. So with some CEOs, we couldn't, now it's changed. But in 2016, which is quite recent, we couldn't talk about it. And with some, we really could. So it really varies across CEOs. I wouldn't cut it too much on age group and stuff. So.
Oh, well, okay, so we're 1 minute over 11. You know that I'm always very, very respectful with time. This has been fantastic, really, really interesting conversation. Thank you all for participating, for your questions, your comments. Jags, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us. And I'm gonna give it to you if you wanna say something before we leave. Please just,
cool. I'll keep it to 10 seconds. Honestly, I just want to thank you, Anna and Katherine, as well. And also, I'm not just presenting here now, I'm part of this family. So now I can join these calls and, you know, hear what other people have to say. And I'm really happy about that. So thanks for letting me in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everyone, enjoy your day, your evening. Have a wonderful evening. And it was really beautiful to see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.